Welcome back, my friends. Today we're finally going to be reviewing my Sony A7 III. I've had this camera for quite some time, so this is definitely a long-term review, and I'm going to rip this thing apart. If you're a subscriber, you know I don't hold back. I'm going to tell you what I love, what I hate. We're going to cover the photography aspect, the video aspect, and find out if this is still something you guys should be thinking about in 2019. Let's go! Well, here it is, the magnificent beast of a camera that is the A7 III. And if you've never heard of this camera, maybe you're new to the planet or you've just been living under a rock. And it's definitely not an accident that this thing's outselling basically everything by a huge amount. It just offers a heck of a lot more for the money than a lot of people are offering right now. But if you're actually just starting to look at this thing, here's a few specs that you'd find just on the website to get you going. Make sure you check out my pros and cons list at the end, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button for more videos just like this. So first, let's look at the build and features of this camera. When you pick it up, it feels good, it feels solid, it's got some weight to it, and you can tell it's made with quality materials, with just a few compromises to keep costs down. Like most mirrorlesses these days, it's nice and compact and weighs only 650 grams. Measuring 5 inches long, 3 7/8 inches tall, and about 3 inches wide, this thing can basically fit anywhere, making it great for travel. But if you are coming from a DSLR, the size does take a little bit of getting used to. On the back and top of the camera, you'd find all the convenient and easy to use buttons that you'd expect, including a ton of buttons that you can customize any way you want. It does have a tilting rear LCD screen that pops out to help you a little bit when you're shooting high or low, but it definitely doesn't cut it the way a fully articulating screen does. But not a deal breaker. And of course, a lovely feature where a few competitors fall short is the dual card slots. This is just something that I would expect in a camera in this range. Also, when it comes to expectations, I expect a camera in this price range to be able to last and perform as needed. And with Sony's new Z-type batteries, the battery life is phenomenal, destroying the competition. And a great feature of this camera is when it comes to charging, you can use the USB Type-C, so you can charge it on the go without removing the battery. On the left-hand side of your camera, you'll find all your ports, including your headphone jack, your mic port, HDMI, USB Type-C, and your old USB connection. Now, most mirrorlesses don't really have the sturdiness a DSLR does, but this camera is weather sealed, but I would take a few precautions and definitely make sure the hot shoe is covered when you're not using it. But I have had this camera in some pretty questionable weather situations and haven't had any issues. Now again, being a mirrorless camera, when you take a lens off, the sensor is right there, very exposed, right out in the open, and in this camera there's nothing to protect it. This is a little bit of a pet peeve for me, as every camera I've ever used, nothing has come close to the amount of sensor dust that I find on this thing. Now, Sony's menu system has taken a lot of criticism over the years for being too complex or too in-depth. And when I first switched over, I got to admit I was a little bit intimidated by it, but you quickly learn that a camera with this many features needs a lot of menu functions, and it just takes some time to learn. It does have a great custom menu section so you can set everything that you use a lot of the time, and Sony's constantly adding and improving its features, like with the new 3.0 update adding this wonderful intervalometer for us. We'll look more in depth at some of the standout features of this camera, but as far as build goes, it gets a solid 4 stars. So how does this thing stack up when it comes to value? Well, at under $2,000, it's incredible. It offers more than basically everybody, and you have to remember, when I actually bought this camera, I was holding off. I was a Canon shooter at the time, and I was waiting for the EOS R to be announced. And when it was, it just didn't stack up. And keep in mind, this was about a year after the A7 III came out. It was a pretty big disappointment for me, and even though I was quite invested in glass, I decided to make the switch. Its main competitors, the Z6 and the EOS R, just didn't compare to what the A7 III had to offer, in my opinion. We'll look at more features and performance in a minute here, but if you are interested in seeing the differences between these three cameras, I do have a comparison video that I'll share with you at the end. But all in all, for value, given everything that it offers, I give the A7 III 4.5 stars. So the value of this camera starts to shine through brilliantly when you start to look at the performance of it. Starting with its 5-axis image stabilized 24 megapixel backside illuminated CMOS sensor, offering up to 15 stops of dynamic range. This thing is a beast in low light, comparing to, or even beating out in some cases, cameras that are worth way more. And I'm not usually one to take somebody's word for it, so I did a few of my own tests here, and this is just an example of what you can expect if you're maybe upgrading from an entry-level camera. This is from the T3i on the left, and this is the A7 III on the right, just to give you an idea of the ISO performance. And both of these are at 6400. And before you go nuts, I'm not comparing these cameras, I'm just giving this to you for reference. Here it is at 12,800, 25,600, and 51,200, the end of the A7 III's native ISO range. As you can see, ISO performance is outstanding. Next, it's got a similar version from its big brother, the A9, Sony's flagship model's autofocus system, shooting 10 frames per second and having an incredibly fast and accurate 693 autofocus points. This covers 93% of the frame, and it's not often that you miss anything with it. As you may have seen and I mentioned earlier, Sony's graced us with the new firmware update 3.0 for the A7 III, adding incredible full-time eye autofocus for humans, and now an unbelievable animal eye autofocus, pushing things to the next level. They've also made overall general improvements to the camera, and that awesome intervalometer. These are things that Sony doesn't have to do but continue to do to push the limits and keep setting the bar higher and higher. A quick note on the IBIS system. Although not as good as, say, the GH5, it does do a great job, and it's never let me down. And that's all I'm going to say about that. One of my favorite features of this camera, and really any mirrorless camera, is the EVF, or electronic viewfinder. Having live view is priceless. It lets us see things the way they're going to be based on our settings in real time. This saves you time, and for me, was a total game changer. This EVF's resolution is 2.35 million dots, and by today's standards is not the greatest. When you compare it to, say, the EOS R, it's definitely not as good, but gets the job done. There was a time when E-mount lenses were far and few between, but that's come a long way now, with a lot of choices to choose from Sony, which are among the best lenses I've ever used, as well as lots of third-party lenses coming on the market, including Sigma, Tamron, and more every day, it seems. But with great quality also comes a great price tag, so keep that in mind. So, quick note on adapters. If you are making a switch from a different manufacturer and don't have $1 million to spend on lenses right away, an adapter seems like a no-brainer, but in my experience, to be honest, you will lose functionality and you won't be able to use your camera to its full potential. But if you have no option or do want to use a different mount lens, I'd really recommend you make sure the firmware on everything is current. So I'm not going to make this video an hour and go through every single mode and function in the whole camera. There's lots of tutorials on that, but I wanted to show you just a few things in the real world, how this thing performs, and here's some pictures I took. That's the best way to judge for yourself just what this thing can do. I've even been lucky enough to win a few awards with this camera, including this one, which this year scored the highest possible judging of excellence and was selected to be part of the Loan Collection, which means it will be representing my country, Canada, in the best of the world of photography. So this thing obviously shoots amazing pictures, but it's also a very capable video camera as well. People are doing incredible things with it, and I'm not really one of those people. I consider myself a photographer first and a videographer second. As I get more into the channel and doing stock video and whatnot, I do learn a bit more, but by no means am I an expert on video. But I will share the basics and just a couple projects that I've put together using video for you to be the judge. Here are just some basic resolutions and frame rates that you'll find in the A7 III. As well, here are a few important things to note. The autofocus is great. You'll get about 3 hours on a battery. Each clip is limited to 30 minutes in 1080 and 4K. For more than that, you're going to need to use an external recorder. It's got a versatile range of picture profiles including H-Log and Cine, and I'll probably be destroyed for this, but to be honest, I don't really use picture profiles in most of my filming. I don't have time to just edit endless hours of content, and for me most of the time it looks just fine. But enough chat and random B-roll. Here's a project that I did for a friend and client to show you what this thing can do. I hope you like it. As you can see, this thing performs incredibly well. It's the best camera I've ever used, and it's exceeded my every expectation. Because of everything you've seen here, I give it 4.5 solid stars for performance. As usual, here are my pros and cons for this camera. So all in all, I love this camera, it's amazing, but nothing's perfect, so I give it 4.5 stars. And I also like to rate things on a scale from never think about again to consider to definitely buy. And in this case, yeah, you guessed it, it's a definite buy. If you're in the market 2018-19, it's a no-brainer. There it is, guys, my long-term review of the Sony A7 III 2019 style. I hope it helped you out. I put my heart and soul into this one, and if it did, hit that like and subscribe button. Drop your questions and comments down below. If you're thinking about picking this camera up, there's a link in the description for you. And like always, make mistakes, be yourself, get out there and take some more pictures. See you guys.